And while it does that, all right, everybody out there, how's everyone doing this evening? We thank you for joining us. This is the Cobb Community Alliance, or excuse me, the Cobb Community Alliance, excuse me. And our candidate forum. This is the 6th installment of a 10 installment session where we are speaking to all the candidates for all the House seats, the commissioner seats, and the sheriff seats that impact Cobb County. We're real excited. We have 3 candidates on with us tonight. I've had the privilege of talking to all of them prior to this. They're excited about being here. But before we go, and let me also mention a phenomenal moderator. So before we get started, I'd just like to take a few moments to share who we are with those of you that are new to our candidate forum. So allow me a moment. So the Cobb Community Alliance is 17 African-American organizations. As you look at this list, you'll see that it comprises the whole fraternal, sorority, the Masonic, faith-based, civil rights, civic, and HBCU Alumni Alliance communities in Cobb County. Collectively, our collective roster is about 5,000 households, but because we touch all those communities that we talked about, we actually reach about 85% of the African-American voting population in Cobb County. We have been doing this series for 5 weeks now, this being our 6th installment with 4 more to go. And as you can see here on the calendar, many of you have tuned in for some of the others, and we're just excited to share this one with you tonight. We have the great pleasure, great pleasure of it being moderated. Whoops, every vote does count. By a good friend of mine, Elise, who will introduce herself in a second, who is president of the Rho Xi Zeta chapter of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. And we have the 3 candidates who will take a moment to introduce themselves to you as well, to start off this forum after we finish with our prayer. The unique thing about all the 17 organizations that are aligned, working together on this candidate forum is that we are all faith-based Christian organizations at our root. So in that spirit, if you wouldn't mind bowing your heads for a moment, and allow me a moment to pray. Dear Heavenly Father, first of all, we thank you for this opportunity to allow us to meet. We thank you for bringing these candidates, their visions to this crowd. We pray for them as they are campaigning and as some of them are already legislating. We pray that that you just make the positive plans as fruitful as possible. We pray as we continue to do these things that you continue to bless all the candidates that have been fortunate enough to speak to our audience, and we pray that you just bless those plans that will make the community flourish. We also pray for all the organizations that are affiliated with the Cobb Community Alliance, all their partners and friends, and we just pray your blessings during this season. We pray also for the victims of COVID, those that are struggling through that season right now. We offer special prayers for their healing. We pray for those that are out of work. We just pray your grace and mercy be upon them. And we just pray for a fruitful session tonight that will manifest blessings to the community at large. We pray this in all prayers in the mighty name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. And we say amen.
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 Okay. With that, I'm going to, get out of this screen that wants to encourage everyone to vote, which that is a message that we continue to emphasize here. There we go. And I'm going to hand the mic over to Elise and allow Elise to take over from here. Elise, this is all yours. I'm going to disappear for a moment.
Thank you, Leroy, and thank you for this great opportunity for allowing me to moderate tonight. As Leroy mentioned, my name is Elise Mason. I am the president of Rho Xi Zeta chapter of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated right here in Kennesaw, Georgia. We have been serving Cobb County for 20 years. We've done numerous things in the community, such as we've donated gift cards to the CVS for the essential workers. This year, we gave out $10,000 in scholarship right here in our very own Cobb County. We're getting ready to prepare for voters registration. We volunteer at Must Ministries, Wheels on Meals, Reflection of Trinity, just to name a few. We recently did the autism walk this weekend. We partnered with March for Babies. We've adopted Sanders Elementary as one of our schools. And on November 6th, we actually have Rho Xi Zeta Day. We got a proclamation last year from Commissioner Cupid. And so therefore, every November 6th, there's a Rho Xi Zeta there. We also have Zeta Foundation of Georgia, which is a nonprofit organization. And that stands for Zeta Empowering, Assisting, and Uplifted. And right now, we're getting ready to open up our Stork's Nest. If you're not familiar with Stork's Nest, Stork's Nest is an incentive-based prenatal health promotion program. And then that program is for low-income pregnant women. And so we're getting ready to partner with Cobb County Health Department where we will store our nest there. And so we encourage these women to go to their doctor's appointment, to go get education, and so that they can have a healthy baby. And in this incentive program, when they do those things, they get so many points, and then they would be able to go to the health center and shop. These points can add up to free diapers, free wipes, free t-shirts, free socks. And so we're super excited about getting ready to open that up. But it's not about me as much as I would like to sit here and talk about what we do. But it's about y'all. So with that said, we're going to get ready to introduce the candidates. But I think the great way to do that is to have you introduce yourself. And so we will start with Ed, followed by Kyle, and then Caroline. And then we'll get into our questions. We're going to have some fun tonight, okay? Can we do that? So remember, 3 minutes. Let's go.
Looking forward to it. Hi, I'm Ed Setzler. I'm the state representative from House District 35. I've had the honor to serve House District 35 for a number of years in the State House of Representatives. Going back to the very beginning, though, to get to know me, I was born in March of 1970 to a 20-year-old unmarried mother in inner city Atlanta. Born in Grady Hospital, she realized that she didn't have the means and the resources to raise me. She would like me to be raised. So she laid me in the hands of a 27-year-old young pastor and his wife to raise me as their own. Literally pulling me out of the bulrushes, putting me in the hands of this young pastor. I had an opportunity in life that I've been thankful for my entire life, that she had the love for me and the care to do the hard thing when she was faced in this position of adversity. Raised in the family of this young pastor in the early 1970s, just as the families of many southern cities were fleeing the inner city to the suburbs in that cynical time of white flight, my family went into the city. My dad was an inner city pastor. He took over an inner city church that had lost 2/3 of its membership in just 2 years because he recognized ministry needed to happen in our inner cities. As I was raised in inner city Columbia, South Carolina, I went to a 95% African-American school, Hyatt Park Elementary School, and spent my formative years in an environment where I didn't look like all the other kids, but I recognized that everybody mattered, and everybody mattered the same. And it was like to be not like every kid in the room. And I recognized that all people were created equal. I learned that as a young child, as part of the fiber of who I am. As we moved to a small town, as my dad was assigned to a position to be a chaplain in a university, I finished high school in a majority African-American school in Newberry, South Carolina. After playing sports and being involved in a paper route and working really a 20-hour-a-week job starting at age 11, I attended Furman University, where during my time at Furman, I learned very quickly, I was not college athletic material. I wasn't going to make it in college sports. The one thing I recognized in that quest for excellence was that we needed to be doing things that are bigger than just ourselves. As a freshman at Furman, I recognized I needed to take some of my experience with sports and athletics and do something for other people. It's that freshman year at Furman that I began working with the Collegiate Educational Service Corps in the City Heights public housing complex of Greenville, South Carolina. I started a 4-year relationship with young people who I realized as I stood in a large group of young kids, there was not a single young person in this group who not only lived with their dad, but even knew a child who did live with their father. In this completely fatherless culture, I was a leader, a big brother, and a father figure for these young kids in a way that shaped the rest of my life. In fact, a pastor who worked at the local park, Brother Mackey, told me once, he said, you know what, Ed, unless you know where it is that you come from, you never know where it is that you should be going. These formative experiences that started very early in life had a directedness to them that I could have never seen then, but I recognized as I took the step up as a second lieutenant in the Army through an ROTC commission, service overseas in the Balkans, the Persian Gulf, and in Southeast Georgia. My wife and I were serving people in deep need from the very beginning of our adult lives. My wife being a counselor in the second poorest school district in Georgia, where many of the kids lived on dirt roads and trailers and had really no access to a decent meal and very little access to any kind of educational attainment, but for the public schools and the counseling and the mentorship that my wife was able to give them. When I left the military, my plan was to be a youth pastor. In fact, that's what I wanted to be. In fact, if I had followed my plan, I would have gone and done that. But God had a different plan for me. He led me to be involved to get in the marketplace. Was hired by an engineering firm in Kennesaw, Georgia that was doing work nationwide in Section 8 housing. In fact, my first 4 years in the professional marketplace, after having been a military officer and company commander in the United States military, was serving communities all across the nation to do environmental testing in Section 8 and public housing. In fact, the week I decided to first run for office, I was crawling around on the floors of the Atlanta Housing Authority doing environmental safety testing for public housing tenants in inner city Atlanta, as we were seeking to serve them with dignity and provide them housing and better opportunities and a safe place to live. That service has informed everything I've done in public office. Because my decision to run for public office was not to advance some goal that I had, but to advance one simple recognition. Regular people ought to matter. I was just a dad in a cul-de-sac who lived in a neighborhood with small kids. I had no political connections, had never been involved in running for public office, and my family was known by nobody. But I recognized then regular folks need to have a clear, responsive, bold voice in the state legislature, and that is the purpose for which I first ran. In my entire time in the service, I have never wavered from that one focus, providing credible, competent, bold, ethical leadership for regular people, infused with the faith, with a recognition we live in diverse communities that need to be represented credibly by somebody who cares more about them than cares about themselves. I've been honored to serve, and I look forward to talking to you some more tonight about my service and the plans that I have for serving this community moving forward.
Thank you, Ed. And we'll turn it over to Kyle. Remember, 3 minutes.
Thank you so much, Elise. And thank you, Ed, for introducing yourself that way. There was a lot there that I think on issues, that we certainly disagree on, and I hope we get a chance to talk tonight about some of the ways that you and I would certainly differ and how we would enact that importance of focusing on the normal people of our district and representing our district. So we'll talk a lot more about that as the night goes on. Just as a means of introducing myself, my name is Kyle Renato. I'm the Democratic nominee for State House District 35 this year in 2020. I'm originally from here in Ackworth. I graduated from North Cobb High School. In fact, my mother graduated from North Cobb High School 30 years before I did. And 3 generations of my family still live here. So Ackworth and Kennesaw is an important place for us. And we have seen this place change and grow a lot over the last 30 years, as anybody who's lived here so long has seen. In that time, we've grown a lot. We've got a lot more young people. We're a lot more diverse, but we haven't really seen our representation change. Right. So we've got a lot of people in office from, Congress to the State House who've been in office for 15, 20 years. And a couple of years ago, after I graduated from Georgetown University, I decided that, look, we need to have more people in office who haven't been career politicians for so long. We need to get a new generation of leadership involved because these issues that are so important to us are critical at this time. The issues like healthcare access, investing in our education system, making sure we're protecting equal rights, civil rights, and voting rights for all people. These are critical issues here in our community in Georgia that frankly our state house hasn't done enough to address. And so I decided in 2018 that we needed to make a difference, that we needed to actually move forward on these issues. And I have a record in this local government and in this area of actually working to make those solutions happen. So even back when I was in high school, I served on an Acworth City board called the Board of Young Aldermen. Our explicit purpose was to get young people and new people involved in local government, in the political process. That's something that's still really important to me today. I think we need to kind of reawaken this sense of civic responsibility, getting more people to vote, making it easier for people to vote, and not putting up artificial barriers to people voting. These are kind of the contrasts that I think we see from our current state legislature. If you just read the news, if you see the things that they're passing these past couple of years, that's the work that I don't want to see happen. What I do want to see is to help us move forward. So that's the reason I decided to run. I skipped over this, but I should mention it. In my real life, I also teach music at a high school here in Acworth. That is a big thing for me. We were talking a little bit before we went live about how this was kind of a surprising career move for me. I wasn't expecting to do it, but it does certainly inform who I am. It's really meaningful to be able to work with this next generation of students. It's really meaningful to be able to see them learn and change and grow and to kind of help shape this next generation of Georgians. And it's a humbling experience to see these people who are going to live on kind of beyond you and take this community to the next generation, to the 21st century. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm looking forward to talking with all of you about the issues that matter and kind of our differences. It's not a debate, but just it's important to talk about the differences between us as parties and us as candidates. And I really appreciate Elise and all the work that you do to be able to do this tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Now I have Caroline.
Thank you so much for hosting this forum. Your organization is very impressive, and that is a very big coalition. So that speaks to how important it is to build bridges, because that is how we advance further. And one of my guiding principles is that a rising tide lifts all boats, and also that compassion is fiscally responsible. I am originally from New Orleans, and the first political action that I ever took was when I was 16 years old, and David Duke was in the runoff for Louisiana governor. Now, some of you might not know who that is, but he was an actual grand wizard of the actual KKK in the actual runoff to govern an entire state. Some friends and I were out doing, teenager things, and saw some people handing out anti-David Duke flyers. So we took a stack and started handing them out too. And the rest, as they say, is history. And here we are almost 30 years later, and I feel like I'm still fighting the same battle. So that fundamentally speaks to why I am running for office, because I don't think we should have to keep fighting this battle. I also don't think that the community that I live in wants to keep getting so much pushback from just about every level of government. That is why you're seeing so many progressive and liberal candidates running now, because we were convinced that we were alone for a long time. We were convinced that we were just by ourselves and it was just our destiny to walk around with our little Democrat bumper sticker or, whatever liberal message that we had and just accept that people were going to be angry about it. Because it's East Cobb, and I live right on the East Cobb Cherokee border, and it can get a little, let's just say people have a lot of strong opinions, and I'm not excluding myself from that number. So that's where we are. I don't believe that the community that I live in wants to see people's rights systematically suppressed. I don't believe that the community that I live in wants to deprive people of Medicare. I don't believe that the people in my community want to continue to see Black and brown bodies murdered by police. I don't think people in my community actually want to see women's choices taken away from them. So change, that's it. I just feel like our representation should represent our community, and I don't feel like that's happening now. So here we are. I am running for House District 46 in Northeast Cobb and Southeast Cherokee. And don't forget to request your absentee ballot as soon as possible. Absentee ballots will be printed and mailed beginning on September 15th. And you can get a unified application on the Secretary of State's website, mvp.ga.gov. I might have that backwards, though. I'll have to look.
Thank you, Caroline. So now that all the candidates have introduced themselves, thank you. We greatly appreciate that. Now we know a little bit about you. So let's have some fun. And let's get into some questions that I'm going to ask. It is not an argumented back and forth. It is your opinion and your opinion. And so I'm going to ask everybody the same question. I'm going to start off with the hot topic today. And so, Caroline, let's start with you with the question, and then we'll work our way backwards with Kyle to answer, and then Ed. So COVID-19 has only magnified the disparities already present in our community. How do you plan to address housing, lack of health care, and unemployment?
So that's a big lift. First and foremost, I think that if we aren't already using federal funds to support renters in particular, then we should do that immediately. We have to expand Medicaid right away. Expanding Medicaid is the single most cost-effective thing that we can do to both protect our citizens and keep people healthy. And healthy, like people who are sick can't be productive. I will never understand the resistance to providing healthcare. I can't wrap my mind around it. Second, unemployment. One of the opportunities in Georgia is for us to produce vast amounts of industrial hemp, which can be used in a variety of ways. It makes fabric, it makes rope, it makes the seeds make oil that can be converted to biodiesel. So there are entire industries that we as Georgians could be leaders in if we weren't so attached to just doing things the way they've always been done. Well, if you do what you've always done, you will get what you've always gotten. And I think that Georgia is primed to look forward instead of backwards, and that by investing in alternative, sustainable energy, that we can solve a looming employment crisis, provide high quality jobs, protect the environment, and expanding Medicaid will allow people to follow their dreams instead of staying in a job that they don't like or is a bad match just because they'll lose their insurance. So I don't know how many people know this, but just as an example, a common diabetes drug, Trulicity, is $2,000 a month. You can't walk away from insurance when your alternative is death. So we have opportunities, we just need to take them.
Thank you. Kyle, same question.
Yeah, thank you, Elise. And I think Caroline kind of teased up the reality that this crisis, it hasn't been, such a big crisis just because of the inherent, values of the virus. It's just kind of revealing these inherent disparities that we already had in our society. People lacking access to healthcare, people not being able to afford, good housing, fair housing and access to affordable housing in the Atlanta area is a big issue. And people making sure that everybody has access to a good job and, living wage. These are all fights that we already knew were existing and things that we had to be improving in our society if we're going to continue to move forward, but we just hadn't taken action on. And COVID has just kind of accelerated those crises even more. The specific questions you asked, Elise, are about access to housing, access to healthcare, and access to unemployment. And those are all kind of tied up in this economic crisis that we're in because of our failure of leadership from our state government and from our federal government to address this crisis. But if our governments were to actually address this healthcare crisis on a health level, that would solve a lot of the economic crisis. So I think we should really start there when we're asking that question. Where we start, we need to have access to more testing. We knew this back in March when this virus came, that the best way to attack this virus head on, to make sure we weren't transmitting more, was access to affordable, available testing. We haven't done that, right? Right now, it's still very difficult to get a test. If you're not sure whether or not you have COVID, it's delays of a couple of weeks. You're not sure quite where to go. You're not sure quite, how to pay for it. We've got to make that simpler. We've got to make testing more available. We've got to make sure that everybody's wearing masks. I mean, I saw somebody post the other day that if you knew there was a drug that decreased your likelihood of transmitting or getting coronavirus, this COVID-19 virus, by 80%, you would take that drug, no question, right? 80% success rate. Well, that's wearing a mask, right? Wearing a mask in our public places, it protects you, it protects those around you, and there shouldn't be no debate about whether or not we're wearing those, because that's going to decrease the transmission of this virus. We know that from science, we know that from the medical doctors. We need to be, requiring this. You think about the nurses and the doctors and the teachers who are taking care of people in this situation. Doctors and hospitals are overrun. Well, if we all wear masks, those people, we would be honoring those people who are doing so much to take care of our lives, because the virus be transmitted less. So we definitely need to make sure we're wearing masks. And we definitely need to be making sure that our education systems and our schools are opening safely. The way we do that is with texting and masks, right? This is the way that we handle this virus. And the fact that we haven't done that in the last 7 months, or however many months it is, 6 months, just kind of speaks to the severe gridlock, this lack of leadership that we see in Atlanta from all levels of our state government. It's time to have people that are actually going to address these things. Now, in the meantime, if we were to open our economy safely under those circumstances, then that would solve a lot of these issues with the economy closing, things like that. But in the meantime, I understand that's not where we are. I'm a teacher. I was telling somebody the other day that, look, our fall semester right now is it's very problematic. There is no good answer for how to teach our students right now. The right answer was to take care of this situation 4 months ago, but we failed that. And so that's why right now we're having these really difficult decisions about whether to go virtual, whether to teach kids in school. If we had addressed this 4 months ago, like most of the other developed nations in the world had, right? This is not complicated. If we had done that, we wouldn't be facing these really difficult decisions that we have today. But here we are. Just to go through it really quickly, I know I've run out of time, I'm sorry. On housing, we need to make sure that we are extending this moratorium on evictions. That's a no-brainer to me, that people who have lost their job as a result of a crisis that was not in their control, you should not lose your housing, you should not be homeless because of this virus. So we need to include, definitely extend that moratorium on evictions. That's huge. We definitely need to be immediately expanding Medicaid. I signed a letter in March that really requested that our current state legislatures, like Ed, immediately expand Medicaid so that we could have healthcare more affordable and accessible to people across our state. Unfortunately, that did not happen, and here we are. And unemployment benefits, right? The number one complaint I hear from people talking on the phone is that our unemployment benefit system in Georgia is completely overrun and is completely dysfunctional. What we need to do is modernize that, right? We need to make sure that unemployment benefits are, first of all, financially appropriated for in our state budget. Those are the priorities. We need to make sure that people who have lost their job, don't lose their livelihoods. And we need to make that accessible through the website. We need to modernize. I talk a lot about how, look, I'm a pretty young candidate, but I think it's really important that we have, new people in office, because we got to bring our local government into the 21st century. Right. And right now, anybody, if you have any friends who have dealt with this unemployment system, they would tell you it's like dealing with the 1980s or the 1990s in technology. Right. This is no way to run one of the largest states in the United States of America in the 21st century. We need to be doing these things. This is absolutely critical. The Department of Labor needs to be releasing unemployment benefits. That's been a big thing that they frankly haven't done. So what it all boils down to, look, we need to follow the science. We need to follow doctors. We need to follow the response that every other developed nation around the world has done. There is a playbook in place to take hold of this virus. The only thing getting in the way is having elected officials in our local area and in our federal government who are willing to make a difference and make that happen. That's why I'm running for State House, to be one of those leaders.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. Ed, same question.
Thanks for the question. I appreciate everybody listening to this. And I think one thing I want to start with, I want to ask folks to step back and recognize the unprecedented times that we live in. Others have been very disappointed at our Department of Labor's ability to process the unemployment claims that have come in. I've been very, very active with my staff, helping accelerate folks who are truly in need, getting them access more quickly than the system otherwise might serve them. As you look at this, you look at the scale of the suffering we face here in Georgia. The Department of normally processes about 20,000 applications for unemployment per month. COVID-19 crisis struck, and Governor Kemp shut down entire segments of our economy, as he should have, as I think any responsible governor would have, for a period of time until we could assess the situation and begin to get things back in place. That number went from 20,000 per month to nearly 800,000 applications in 1 month. The system was flooded with 40 times the capacity at one time that it had faced in the past. So as you think about that, we think about the scale of this, it is unprecedented. And having led through this, having been a leader that's called folks, at 9:45 at night at their home with my cell phone to help walk through the system, to make sure they have the resources they needed, to make sure that their registration numbers are right, to make sure that their families, if they had any needs that couldn't be taken care of by unemployment, those were being addressed. If both incomes in the home were not addressed, picking up the phone, calling Secretary of Labor Mark Butler, myself, on my cell phone saying, Mark, this family in Kennesaw has no income whatsoever. They need to be processed tomorrow and get paid, or they're in dire straits. Having the relationships, the experience to be able to make those kinds of things happen is why I've been serving, because regular folks need to be the priority of our government. It's easy to talk about what someone else should have done or shouldn't have done. And I think I've been doing some of that myself. It's easy to Monday morning quarterback other leaders. But what I've tried to focus on is providing leadership in our state to say, folks, we both have to protect ourselves from this unprecedented virus of COVID-19 and get our economy moving again. Those of us who are fortunate enough to be in professions, I serve the architecture and engineering business. Those who are fortunate enough to be able to stay at home and shelter in place have been very, very good. It's been interesting to me to watch folks, pundits on TV, folks, perhaps in another party waving their finger saying, we need to shut down the economy. We need to be able to just shelter in place. Well, those that can need to. As I look out my window and I see the garbage truck coming by, I see the $10 an hour employee picking up the trash in front of neighborhoods. Why is he picking up trash? He might have a felony record. He might not have access to a better job than being a trash collector, but he has dignity. He has value as a human being. Why is it that he can't shelter in place? Why is it that a $10 an hour trash worker has to pick up people's trash while they're sheltering in place? Why is it that an $8.50 an hour stocker in a grocery store has to go to work, stock shelves and clean shelves where hundreds of other folks come through in a day? They can't shelter in place. Why is it that people believe they have the luxury to sit back and let others serve them? It's a lie. The fact is, the only way for us to move forward is to be very careful, to wear masks, sanitize the places we go, the places we come in contact with others, but get the economy moving as well so that we can both protect ourselves and get back to work. People who slaughter pigs to pack bacon to send to the grocery store so we can have it delivered to our house by Amazon, those folks can't shelter in place. And the idea that we as leaders think that we can just sit back and be served by others is a lie. We have got to recognize we have to both protect all of our people from COVID-19 and get the economy with proper protections moving again. And that's the kind of hard leadership I've tried to provide. We have to be willing to tell the American people the truth. We have to do those hard things. We have to take on the mantle of leadership, not point just how others might have done better, but we have to take that mantle on ourselves. We have to own those problems. We have to talk to folks at 9:45 at night on our cell phones to get them the services and the help that they need so that real people can move forward in the real world. That's the kind of leadership I've sought to provide. That's the kind of leadership as I've reached out to our governor to make sure that we as a state are providing incentives and providing programs where folks are not evicted from their homes, where we have the kinds of testing regimes we've had in Georgia. Georgia's been better than many states in our testing. In fact, Cobb County has had free testing. The lines are down. People are not having to pay $100 to get tested. They're getting free testing right here in our communities. I don't stand behind every decision that's been made. I don't stand behind every decision of our governor. I'm known for being able to stand up against both my own party and the other party. But we have to recognize these times need serious leadership that's not just willing to criticize, but that's willing to get in the muck, in the mire with regular people own their problems and help lead them through those things in the real world, where we both protect ourselves and we get our economy functioning again. That's the kind of leadership I want to continue to provide to our state.
Okay, thank you, Ed.
I'm sorry, if I can, I mean, because Ed, you mentioned that, why can some industries stay at home and why can't others? I'm a teacher. I'm one of those people that doesn't have the option of working from home. I think we were talking about this before we came online. I am going in person to teach in schools, and that's why it's so important. I know personally that it's very important that everybody wear masks, because that's how we make sure we don't transmit the virus in person. Unfortunately, the government sued the governor sued local governments from requiring masks to be worn in schools such as myself. That's what the problem is, right? The other thing I want to mention, I know this is not a debate, forgive me, but it's just really important. Ed mentioned that we tell the truth to our constituents. I want to make sure this is very clear, right? On the unemployment benefits, Ed, I'm really grateful that you were there for so many people to be able to work through these unemployment benefits issues. I've heard that from so many current state legislators that they are inundated with those emails and those phone calls, and they've been able to help out. The point is that our system is broken if the only thing standing in the way of somebody getting their unemployment benefits, of getting their livelihood in line because of a virus which have taken their job, is you, right? For all the people that you've been able to help, there are so many others that haven't been able to. I want to make sure that everybody in our state does have access to those. And that's why it's really important that we do address this healthcare crisis.
Okay, well, this is not a debate, so we don't want to go back and forth.
Ma'am, I understand, but again, I may jump that. With all due respect, Kyle, if you get elected as a young legislator from Cobb County, you don't have it in your hands to just magically solve that. You might believe that you can, but it takes real leadership, folks that understand organizations, that understand how to lead large groups of people, that have led in environments. I'm not going to get into a back and forth with you.
Right.
I'd like to kind of stay within our format if we could. But
yes, please.
I want to challenge you to take on a little humility and recognize that as you step in as a state legislator, these kinds of promises, you need to have a little humility on one legislator's ability just to solve this overnight. Having lived through these kinds of things for many years, I'm proud of the record that many of our leaders have, including myself, have been able to demonstrate on behalf of regular people in the trenches, solving real problems, not just imagining them. Okay,
so we're going to move on to the next couple of questions. And we're going to remember, it's not a debate. It's your opinion versus your opinion, right? And so we want to be respectful of the people that is watching, and we also want to be respectful of each other's time. So 3 minutes. So Kyle, I'm going to start this next questions with you, okay? What are your top 3 legislative priorities, and how do you plan to address them?
Great question. Yeah, and I kind of touched on this at the beginning. The things that are really important to me are making sure we are expanding access to healthcare in the state of Georgia, making sure we're investing in our public education system. I recognize I'm a little bit biased because I myself am a teacher, but I think it's really important for everyone. And my third one, forgive me, this is going to be a very politician response, but my third one is also 3 issues, right? Protecting equal rights, civil rights, and voting rights for all people. This is critical in our day and age. So the way that we can expand healthcare in Georgia is making sure we're expanding Medicaid. This is a program that was set up in President Obama's Affordable Care Act back in 2010. So 10 years ago now, there was a federal law that said that the federal government was going to give money to the states in order to expand Medicaid. Our state didn't accept that. That means that tens of thousands of Georgians' families don't have access to affordable healthcare. I think that's a no-brainer. We got to make that happen to expand healthcare access. In terms of investing in our education system, I tell people this all the time and it kind of blows their mind, but just last year, our state legislature voted to fully fund our education system to their own self-defined limits for the first time in 16 years. I want you to think about that before people, take the chance to kind of use that as a celebratory measure. Our state legislators only thought to fully fund education for the first time last year in almost 2 decades, right? And I think that's just wrong, right? I mean, I think all of us who have students in our public schools know, I mean, in many cases, students are using textbooks that are 10, 15, 20 years old. Our facilities aren't quite up to stuff. We need to be investing in our public education system in order to be competitive in the 21st century. And that starts by fully funding education every year and not just in a year before election years. Now, in terms of protecting equal rights, civil rights, and voting rights for all people, this is critical, right? One of my passions is making sure that we make it easier for people to vote. This is something that I've been working on since high school. And regularly we see about, we're really excited when we get about a 50% voter participation rate in our elections, right? In 2016, something like 120 million Americans voted. That's roughly half of our population, right? And we felt pretty proud about that 50%. And I really feel like we need to go for 100%, right? We need to remove the barriers to people voting and making sure that everybody can vote by mail, certainly in this pandemic, that everybody can vote early if they want to, that we make election day a holiday. So, people, if they have work on election day, they can make it to vote. There's a lot of different things we can do to make voting more accessible that other states in the United States have done and seen upticks in voter participation. We need to be doing that. Instead, what we see right now is our state government making it more difficult to vote, right? Putting in place these barriers. That's just not the approach that I would take. Equal rights, right? Equal rights and civil rights. I think maybe we'll talk about Black Lives Matter and equal rights issues later. Maybe not. I'm not sure. But that's critical to me right now too, right? I want to make sure that everybody, regardless of how you look, how you identify, where you're from, has equal rights under our Constitution. These are, the promise of America. It's really important that we make that real for people, and that's what I'll be fighting for in the State House as well. Sorry, Elise, I think you might be muted.
Thank you. So, Ed, could you answer the same question, please?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I in the fall of 2017, as the chair of the Committee on Science and Technology, I led a statewide effort with our bipartisan committee to look at voting technology and study over the course of the entire fall potential threats on the integrity of our voting system. Having gone through 4 specific committee hearings, bringing in national experts on election security, election technology, I led the effort. And again, folks, let me start by saying I hesitate to use the word I, because I is not a word I like to use very much. The fact is, I led the effort for our entire state from November, December 2017 through the 2018 legislative session to craft a bill to provide verifiable voting technology that all people in the state, from all parties, all corners of the state, large communities and small communities, could be confident in that every single person's vote counted. I was honored to be joined as my primary co-sponsor. My number 2 sponsor of the bill was Dean Calvin Smyrie, a 46-year legislator from Columbus, Georgia, who was the former national chairman of the Legislative Black Caucus nationally. Dean Smyrie, as my number 2 signer, went arm in arm with me in 2018 to lead a credible bipartisan election technology bill, because there's nothing more sacrosanct in government than every vote counting. Very late in session, on the 39th day of session, national liberal interests kind of reigned supreme, and the bipartisan coalition that I had pulled together fell apart at the very, very last hour of session, and that bill didn't pass in 2018. But those kinds of coalitions to take care of the most important things, like verifiable voting technology, where every vote counts, is not something I'm just talking about. I've been the statewide leader in this, proactively through my Science and Technology Committee to study the issue in detail and then build bipartisan coalitions to lead an entire statewide effort to make this kind of thing real. Secondly, my second issue that I want to speak to today is really the most important thing to me of all, is protecting the fundamental basic rights of all people. I've been a subcommittee chairman on the Judiciary Non-Civil Committee, which is the criminal law committee, for 11 legislative sessions. The entire criminal justice reform package under Governor Nathan Deal, which Democrat Keem Jeffries from New York and Doug Collins in Georgia came together and passed this last year. The national model for criminal justice reform we're seeing at the federal level was pioneered in room 132 of our state capitol. 50% of those bills were crafted in my Judiciary Non-Civil Committee that recognized that people who are committing crimes, not because they're hardened criminals, but because they have a root cause of drug addiction, need to be channeled into the drug treatment program, not into our prisons. Those kind of criminal justice reforms our nation is led on. And I've been right at the center, not just talking about them, not just voting on them, but crafting those pieces of legislation in my very subcommittee itself. Additionally, things such as access to courts and access to liberty. This legislative session, fighting against some members of my own party, I stopped the process that would have consigned people in jail and in prison for being given Zoom access to courts. As much as I love talking to all you on Zoom, I believe somebody in prison who's going to court needs to have a chance to face their accuser, needs to have a chance to look the judge right in the eye, face to face, in person in a courtroom. There had been an effort this year to stop that and to make it possible where folks could just be Zoomed into court if their prison or their jail is far from the court in which they're being tried. I led the effort, lost bills that I was sponsoring in the state Senate as political punishment because I led a bipartisan effort, followed by Republicans and Democrats, to stop this idea of Zoom justice, because Zoom justice is not real justice. Additionally, in 2017, every bill I was sponsored was also killed in the Senate for political punishment because I stood for the right to peaceful protest. There was a domestic terrorism bill that would have taken peaceful protest that blocked streets and turned it into a 5-year felony. I said, stop, we can't do this. You know, Congressman John Lewis went to jail 42 times for getting into good trouble. When you get into good trouble, you're arrested, you go to the jail, you bond out, you move on, and you have your day in court, and you're able to move on with your life. But what would have happened in 2017 is you would have gone to prison for 5 years. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a great tradition in our nation of nonviolent protest. And I would never, ever allow that kind of thing to happen on a committee in which I serve. I personally led the bipartisan coalition that won by a vote of 7-5 in committee, followed by Justice Christian Coomer, Superior Court Judge Dusty Hightower, then Minority Leader Stacey Abrams, Whip Bodie, Bob Trammell, and Darshun Kendrick. The 7 of us, led by me, stopped that domestic terrorism bill that would put people in prison for nonviolent protest and blocking streets, because there's nothing that matters more to me than protecting the fundamental rights of all people, no matter what you look like, no matter what your income is, not even depending on what cause you're fighting for. My life's work over the last decade, passing out promotions and advancement in my professional life so that I can serve in the legislature, protect the basic rights of persons, is what I'm committed to continuing to fight for in our state house. As a leader, again, as part of the criminal justice reform package, the idea that people who've simply been accused of crimes would be marked for life with their criminal record. I led the effort in 2015 to ensure that Georgia law made it clear that unless you're convicted of a crime, you don't have a criminal record. Before that, the mere accusation of crime could follow you for the rest of your life, until the bill I led on to stop that. If you're acquitted, your record is wiped clean, because everybody has a basic right to liberty. They're innocent until proven guilty. And those sacred functions, the sacred concept of the rights of every person is the most important thing we do in government. If I'm reelected, I will continue not just to participate, not just to vote, not just to talk. I will continue to be the statewide leader in leading bipartisan coalitions, not just for access to make sure everyone votes, but to preserve the rights of the accused as innocent until proven guilty in our court system, and continue to lead our state in a bipartisan way that we can all be proud.
Thank you, Ed. Ms. Caroline?
I'm sorry, I got a little distracted. Can you repeat the question for me, please?
Sure, absolutely. What are your top 3 legislative priorities, and how do you plan to address them?
Number 1, expand Medicaid. There's absolutely no reason on earth that in the 21st century that there are people who have to make the choice between healthcare and basic life necessities. That is absolutely insane. No one should have to choose their home or their health. We are the richest country in the world, and there is no excuse for that. Number 2, restore women's right to choose and make sure that we are in line with our constitutionally protected right to make decisions about our own bodies. Number 3, develop a plan for infrastructure. Right now, the average age of a bridge in the United States is between 45 and 47 years old. And most of these things were constructed to last approximately 50 years. So it will also help for our recovery from the coronavirus, because I don't know what it's like where you are, but mask usage is erratic out here. Can't go to the Publix because it's terrible, but can go to the Kroger because they clearly are feeling community minded and making sure that everyone covers their faces so that they don't spread the plague. So healthcare infrastructure and women's rights, in particular, women's rights to choose what they do with their own bodies. That is constitutionally guaranteed just as much as the Second Amendment. I would also like to see us have a sane and reasonable conversation about limits on how many guns does one person need? I mean, seriously, there are more guns than people in the United States. I don't have the specific statistics for Georgia, but there's a lot of loopholes. Like, a lot of people who really should not have access to firearms do have access to firearms, and people who are critically depressed and suicidal are 80% more likely to be successful in committing suicide if they have access to a gun. I would like to encourage everyone to look at the Everytown for Gun Safety's Be Smart campaign about proper storage and having appropriate training for the weapons that you own. And in particular, as we see people become more isolated due to the uneven lockdown and their personal risk levels, we have a mental health crisis looming. I was following the Diversion page before that got taken down. And there were a lot of hospitals that were on completely full in the psychiatric ward. People don't have access to their usual support. Somebody who has a support group can't see them. And so what is that going to do to people who have to seek mental health care, which is not always covered by insurance, or when it is covered in a very limited way, often in a way that limits its usefulness. And that circles right back around to expanding Medicaid. Expanding Medicaid is fiscally responsible. It will cost us less and get us more. Having a healthy population is the number one way that we can move forward, especially after the pandemic, when so many people are going to have chronic conditions. It's not the case rate is not just about who died. It's about the consequences that we don't know what they are yet. So yeah, people just cover your germ holes, okay, nose and mouth. Remember that you live in a community of other people. And just because you might be able to withstand an infection, that doesn't mean that your cashier's grandmother can. So please be mindful of the other people in your community when you have to go out to take necessary risks. Also, I would like to see, right now, Georgia's official minimum wage is something crazy like $5 an hour. Doesn't matter a bunch because federal is $7.25, but I'd really like to see us look at that. There's no reason why the people who keep our society running make so little money. Most people are closer to bankruptcy than being millionaires at any given moment in the day, and that is unacceptable. I would like to see tax abatements for large corporations ended, and that money pumped back into our economy, into our social nets, social workers, all sorts of things, literally anything other than the police.
Thank you, Ms. Caroline. So we'll move on to our next question. And this time I'm going to start with you, Ed, and then followed by Kyle, and then Ms. Caroline. In light of local and national tensions between communities of color and law enforcement, how do you propose improvement relationship between the two communities?
Thanks for the question. I've been talking to a lot of folks about this as I've gone door to door in my campaign, talking to people. I think it's important to listen to folks first. I've listened to folks from really all across the spectrum in different parts of the state. This is a very diverse state we live in. One thing that I've heard consistently, and I really started with this myself, just instinctively, it made sense to me, that I plan to lead on if reelected, having seen this and having been through the whole cycle of this last year and all the turbulence we've been seeing, all the tragedy we've seen, the loss of life and just the spontaneous violence we've seen, is I believe we need to see a couple things. I strongly oppose the idea of defunding the police. In fact, we need to pay our police well, we need to train them better, and we need to have better community oversight of our law enforcement. We need to pay our police better so that we have better candidates in service that can support families with a law enforcement salary. Secondly, we need to train them dramatically more. As a company commander in the United States Army with 211 soldiers under my command in a rapidly deployable unit in Fort Stewart, Georgia, I recognize that the busyness of the day, all the things that seem to be important today, ultimately was secondary to my ability to train my soldiers to be prepared to fight and win our nation's wars in the hostile environment that they would see in the coming years. Likewise, our police officers, we know they're going to be in harm's way. We know that because of the positions we put them in, they need to be trained not just to guard their own lives, but to safeguard the lives of people in very ambiguous and difficult circumstances. It's just a matter of time that every officer is in those circumstances. The idea of defunding the police because it's politically popular is the most irresponsible thing we could ever do. We need to pay them well. We need to train them dramatically better on the difficult circumstances they're going to find themselves in. And then for accountability, we need to put citizen oversight into a whole new place statewide with respect to law enforcement. This idea that local governments elect local officials or that state government elects state officials, and that sort of solves the problem, really misses the point that there's not specific oversight of the specific functions and decisions of policing agencies around our state. There are a couple models, there's a couple communities that do it quite well, but they're the exception, not the rule. What I would like to lead on, as I've led before these kinds of ways in statewide efforts, is to ensure that every agency not only has adequate and higher pay for their officers, has dramatically better training for the ambiguous circumstances that the officers are going to find themselves in, not defund the police, but fund them adequately and train them well, and then put citizens directly involved in oversight of policing, that decisions that are made, whether it's an officer-involved shooting or something more significant and certainly more common than that. I think when there's officer-involved shootings today, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation gets involved, and there is oversight to those cases, some of which end in tragedy, some of which don't. But those garden variety everyday cases where young men and women are perhaps pulled out of their car, searched, perhaps searched appropriately, perhaps not, those little cases that affect people every day need to have the scrutiny of citizen oversight and a volunteer citizen oversight panel of every police department in the state, so that regular citizens from all backgrounds, no matter what city they're in, no matter what county they're in, have the ability to oversee what's happening. And the police know they're not in a gotcha world where they're going to get burned, but there's going to be the light of day that shines on those little decisions they make, whether it's pulling someone out of their car to do a search, whether it's arresting somebody, or whether it's that fateful, awful decision to perhaps pull a trigger in the defense of life. Those kinds of decisions need citizen oversight like we've never seen before. And I look forward to leading on that in 2021, in the 2021-2022 legislature.
Thank you, Ed. I'm just talking and the mute button is on. Kyle, same question.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very, very important question. We've seen time and time again throughout this summer, but also for the past decades, right? There are so many people, whether it's Ahmaud Arbery, Rashard Brooks, George Floyd, Jacob Blake, who have been at the receiving end of a criminal justice system that over polices Black and brown bodies and doesn't do enough to keep us safe. I have to say, throughout all these protests, which I participated in this year, and just all the really terrible news about this continuing cycle of injustice this year, the thing that I keep thinking as somebody running to represent a community here is I don't want us to wake up tomorrow morning and read the paper and have the next person who's killed, who loses their life to this pervasive, crisis of racist gun violence, right? I don't want that person to be somebody from our community, to be our neighbor, to be one of our family members, right? And right now, That's entirely possible, right? And I think we all have a moral responsibility to do everything we can as community leaders and as people running for state legislature to talk about what we can do, and as a state government, put in place real solutions to prevent that from happening, right? Ed, I'm delighted to hear that you support accountability for police departments. There was that bill, House Bill 660, this year in the State House, which would have done that. I'm not sure that you did support that bill then, so I'm delighted to hear that you would support such legislation moving forward if you were to be reelected. So I would support that, right? That's a great first start, House Bill 660, which establishes accountability for these police forces to make sure that we're not, shooting unarmed Black and Brown Americans anymore. I also supported the hate crimes bill that's passed earlier this year. The real importance of that is making sure that people who are African American, people of color in our communities, if they're targeted for their race, for racial reasons, then we can actually establish that as a crime and start to deter that behavior in our state. Ed, you voted against that bill, so I'm curious why you want to be a leader on this issue now. And then also in general, more criminal justice reform, right? We need to reform this mandatory minimum sentence here. We need to make sure that we're decriminalizing marijuana, which is, as you know, is a civil rights issue. There's lots of things that we can do to create a more just criminal justice system, right? To create a system in which all people are treated equally in the court of law, and to make sure that the next person, that nobody in our community feels unsafe when they're dealing with the police. Now, your specific question was about what we would do about police interactions, right? And something that I think actually Acworth and Kennesaw has done a relatively better job on than most other situations, right? Than most other municipalities is community policing. This is a key term, right? And that goes to the heart of establishing this trust, this relationship between our communities and our police department. We've got to make sure that the police are seen as a resource, right? I agree with Joe Biden, right? That we don't want to defund and get rid of all of our public safety officials, but we do want to reform them. We want to make sure that if somebody is seeking mental health treatment, right, and is having an issue in their home, that they don't lose their lives, that they get the help they need. It's these sorts of processes. We need to think about how we're doing it as a state government. These are leadership activities that Acworth and Kennesaw has actually started on, right? My cat wants to say hi, forgive me.
He's like,
yeah. My cats even know that Black Lives Matter. Look at that. Anyway, I don't remember where I was, but there's a lot of solutions that we can make happen. It's on my website in criminal justice reform, also in community police relations. We've got a lot of distance to go. But the gist of it is this, right? It shouldn't be controversial for all of us to say that Black Lives Matter. It shouldn't be controversial to say that we all want to do everything possible to make sure everybody in our community is safe, which, let's face it, let's just be blunt about it, is not the case right now. Right, it's time for some new leadership in our state government to make that a reality. And for all those who have been protesting, who have been posting on social media and joined this movement as I have this past year, well, in November, we get our chance to actually have our say at the ballot box and to make these changes we want to see a reality.
thank you, Kyle. Ms. Caroline?
So as for police and community relationships, I'll just go ahead and plant my flag in this hill right now. I do think we should defund the police. I think that the police are responsible for way too many things, just as we've done to our school system. When the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything is a nail. Police should not be responding to mental health calls. Trained social workers should be responding to mental health calls. Police should not be responding to, oh my God, there's a homeless person and he might come near me. Trained social workers should be responding to those calls. We should be investing in our communities. We should be taking the money that we would spend on incarceral processes and spend them instead on making sure that people and families have a stable foundation. We're seeing this play out in the schools right now too. There's a lot of people who are very worried about who may be essential workers or can't do their jobs from home, have to face the choice of sending their children into schools where they may not be safe because the alternative is for them to be home alone and unsupervised, which technically Georgia doesn't have a law against that, but that's another opportunity for the unequal application of a status, depending on what flavor of privilege you may or may not have as a person. whether I'm just going to go out and say it, there's a lot of things that I can get away with that other families may not be able to get away with. Like, nobody's going to say boo to me if I leave my kids in the car at Kroger for 10 minutes. But I have seen people get very upset with Black and brown families for leaving their kids in the car. Like, that was like a treat when I was little. Like, oh, I'm just going to stay in the car. Like, I win. The point of defunding the police is not to eliminate the police. And let's be real. When was the last time that a police officer prevented a crime? Because that's not really what happens. What happens is the police take the report. You don't need to be armed for that. I do agree that training needs to change fundamentally, because right now what happens during police training is young recruits, who are often young men, whose frontal cortexes are not completely developed yet, are shown images of Black and brown bodies as criminals over and over and over again, until it is an automatic response for them to see a person who is not white and assume they are up to something. Not only that they are up to something, but that they are some sort of superpowered, dangerous psychopath. You see this over and over again. I'm not 100% sure that policing as it exists now can be reformed. Do we need security? Yes, we do. Do we need people to investigate crimes? Yes, we do. Sometimes might we need a person who is armed and trained to respond to a violent situation? Yes, but not even in a domestic violence situation. Domestic violence situations are actually more dangerous the more weapons you have involved. And several municipalities across the country have instead started doing things like sending social workers. Are you sensing a theme here? Like, we need more social workers. We need to acquire, train, and pay many social workers, because a lot of the things that we push on police and schools are properly the province of trained social workers. Now, that's something that requires a master's degree, so we have the issue of how to pay for it. Well, take it from the cops, because they don't need to be handling that anyway. Let's pay the professionals who have the actual skills to handle the problems we want to solve, instead of turning everything into a potential firefight where people could lose their lives.
Thank you, Ms. Caroline. So we're at our hour, so I'm going to allow each of you 3 minutes or less to do your closing statement, and then Leroy will come back on and we'll close it out. But thank you for your answers to my questions, greatly appreciated. And so let's get ready to hear your closing statement. So Ms. Caroline, this time I'm going to start with you for your closing statement, and then we'll go to Ed, and then we'll end with Kyle, and then Leroy will come back on with us, okay?
Okay. So it just really what I want people to walk away with is, new ideas can often sound scary and upsetting.
Right.
But when we stop changing, we die. This is a fundamental fact across all of the sciences, in your personal life, in your professional life. When you stop changing, you stop living. And we're seeing the results of that in a very real way with the COVID pandemic. In the beginning of March, that was our opportunity to start planning for what the fall was going to look like. And we didn't do that. Our sitting legislators voted for a budget that includes almost $1 billion in cuts, while we simultaneously hand out $3 billion in tax abatements to corporations. So it's very frustrating to me that I don't feel that there's a people first priority system under the Gold Dome right now. And I am a frequent flyer at advocacy days and committee meetings and state board of elections meetings. And it's still so stressful to me that after this whole process of these new voting machines are still fundamentally trash. They just are. They're trash. Human beings cannot read barcodes, so the printout is worthless. Unless you were going to define the vote as the human readable portion of the ballot, which currently it is not, even though a large group of committed citizens made requests often of the State Board of Elections, our local county Board of Elections. But that is what it is. It's passed. I encourage you all to vote absentee because then you have a record of your vote. What I would like people to do going forward is just look around in your community and see if there's a place where you can help someone out or you can be the kind of change that you want to see in the world. That's all we can do. Everybody just has to do their best. And I do sincerely believe that our community out here in House District 46 is compassionate, justice-minded, and ready to be represented fairly and equitably. Our incumbent has not had a town hall since 2017, where he refused to answer questions about protecting young women who had been victims of rape on college campuses. We can do better, Georgia. We absolutely can do better. You deserve better. You deserve a Democrat.
Thank you, Ms. Caroline. Ed, remember 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. If we look back in history, in the days of the early church, decisions were made to endow leadership on individuals who'd been willing to suffer for the cause. Are you willing to suffer to do the right thing? Are you willing to say hard things, do the right thing, even under pressure? That was the marks of a leader in the early times of our church. I'll tell you the same way in politics, it's much the same today. Nothing's new under the sun. People who are willing to say things to get elected, people who are willing to construct well-crafted talking points will always be before you. One thing I offer you is not to suggest that I'm going to agree with you on every issue. I believe the American people need to be told the truth. I believe people of color need to be told the truth. Now, these issues of hate crimes bills, I mean, do you realize that in a nation where 12% of the population are African-American, 25% of hate crimes convictions are Blacks? These things are not what we think they are when they're sold by the woke media and liberals to try to convince people they're looking after the interest of people of color or marginalized communities. Ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you the truth because I always have. I will tell you the truth just like I tell people in the Democratic Party the truth when they're wrong and when they're right, and the Republican Party when they're wrong and they're right. There is no leader in our state legislature the last decade who's been willing to stand against his own party and against the opposing party when they're wrong, and to lead on hard issues. And simultaneously in doing that, and simultaneously taking slings and arrows, attacks from the front and attacks from behind and the back, has been able to build bipartisan coalitions to lead on tough issues. It's who I am, where I come from. I grew up in a school with young people that didn't look like me. I grew up in a family who couldn't afford to send me to a private college. I had to earn my way through on academic honors and on ROTC scholarship. I've sought to lead people by saying and doing the hard things. I've known Kyle Renato, my opponent, since he was a high school student. A very articulate young man. I could count him a friend. And I'm sure he's a very good band teacher and a very good law student. But ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot in play in 2020 in our state legislature. I've had the honor to command American soldiers, commanded a United States Army company of more than 200 soldiers in a rapid deployment division. I've served overseas in the Balkans. I've served in the Middle East. I've led in some of the toughest environments our military has to offer. And I've done it humbly. I've not talked about it. I don't wear my military accolades on my shoulder. It's part of who I am. In the business community, I've led global organizations that have served in Africa, that served in Europe, that served in Asia, the Pacific Rim, providing engineering and environmental services to clients all around the world. It's been an honor to do that. It's been an honor to do that with humility, competence, and leadership. And in serving the legislature, the one thing I'm committed to do, the day that I decided to run, I was wearing t-shirt, sandals, and short pants in a town hall meeting with my school board member. And I recognized that I wasn't being listened to, and that regular people ought to matter. I had no political history. I had no political family. I had no money. But I got together with friends in my driveway and a little folding table and said, you know what? Regular folks need to matter, no matter what they look like, no matter where they come from, no matter how much income they have, regular people need to fight for the rights of regular people. Friends, we're in a time where the truths that make America unique in our world are under unrelenting attack. People will talk smoothly to you in elections, but a movement that is seeking to undermine law enforcement and uphold the falsehood, the idea that a young white man with a goatee, with a Black Lives Matter shirt on, smashing the glass of a Black-owned business is somehow looking after the rights of people and minorities is a lie. We have to care enough about the rights of people to say that's wrong. We have to stand with law enforcement. We have to train law enforcement, and we have to give them the tools and the accountability to regular citizens to make it actually work for us. You need people who are going to tell you the truth, who are going to say the hard things, not just the talking points, not just the slick criticisms of opponents, but are willing to take slings and arrows to lead on hard things. That's been my life's work. Nothing is more of an indicator of what's going to happen in the future than what's happened in the past. And for more than a decade, I've been willing to lead on hard things opposed by my own party, speak against governors from my own party, and speak against the other party when they're wrong to do the right thing for ordinary people of conscience. Many of you on the call are exactly that, and I would ask you to support my leadership for re-election to the State House of Representatives. I'm deeply honored to serve, and I'd ask you for 2 more years of service. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Kyle?
That was a lot. So I think what I really just want to start with is what this election is about, right? And this election is not about whether we're, sticking with party leadership or not. This election is not about, how we talk or how we look or where we're from. What this election is about is representing the values of Ackworth and Kennesaw, right? And I'm running for office this year to make sure that we are expanding access to healthcare, that we are making sure we're investing in our public education system, to make sure we are protecting women's rights, equal rights for LGBT people, making sure we're protecting voting rights, civil rights. And I have concrete plans on my website, kylerenato.com/solutions. You can look through the platform. It's a common sense platform that makes us move forward on all of these issues. That's what I'm running on, right? And I think at the heart of it, it's about who's actually going to represent our issues and our values in this district. I think, Ed, I absolutely agree that past performance is the best indicator of what's to come. And I'm trying not to be too debate worthy, but I mean, let's just face it. Look, like you can't pretend that you're going to be a different legislature come 2021 than you've been for the past 15 years, right? And on every issue that we've heard from tonight, it kind of sounds like you're kind of pretending to be more of a progressive than you are, right? And I just worry. Maya Angelou said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." Right. And I'm running to be a progressive problem solver in the State House. I'm running to actually bring new leadership and new solutions to move us forward on these issues. Just one little story. So when I was, as we've been campaigning, I've been talking on the phone with a lot of voters. We haven't been knocking on doors due to coronavirus, but we have been calling a lot of voters. And this one woman sticks in my head, and I think about her every day because just before our first primary election on June 9th, I was talking to her about a week before, and I was telling her about my platform and I'm running. And she said, "Okay, Kyle, this all sounds good and I'm going to vote for you, but I have to be honest with you." She said, "I don't really trust politicians because so often people just say the right things. And then when they get into office, they vote a different way." And she said, "We've been seeing that for years and years and years and years." And she said, "So I'm going to vote for you, but I need you to promise that you're going to stand with us, that you're going to continue to listen, that you're going to continue to be this problem solver and fight for these solutions that we need." And I think about that every day because that's the commitment that I'm making as a legislator, right? That's the commitment that I'm making to this community that I care so much about, that my family has lived so long in. It's voters like that that are these normal people that we keep talking about tonight. We need to be fighting for them. We need to be making sure that we're not just standing up for our own personal interests, that we are serving them in this community. That's why I'm running. That's why I'm asking for your vote, Ackworth and Kennesaw, if that's the type of representative you want for the next 2 years.
Thank you, Kyle. So Leroy will be coming on to closing, but before I turn it over to Leroy to close, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. It was a pleasure speaking with you, asking you the questions and having you answer. And so on behalf of the remarkable Rosei Zeta chapter, again, of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Kennesaw, Georgia, I just want to say thank you. Leroy, thank you for this great opportunity. And for everybody out there that's listening, remember, every vote's count. Remember to go vote. Register. It is important. If you never thought about it before, this is one of the most important years for election. So remember, you matter, you matter, you matter. Thank you.
Elise, the panel, wow, what a great and engaged conversation tonight. I mean, we really covered a lot of material this go round. First thing I want to do a quick round robin, because we try to keep this under an hour or right around an hour. Can I have every candidate just unmic, Ed, if we could start with you, unmute your mic for a quick second. If you could just share with all the folks how they can get in touch with you, your campaign site or whatever point of contact you want to give them. Could you do that real quick?
You bet. Again, my mobile number is area code 404-630-8452. It's on our state website. Any one of the 60,000 constituents I represent can call me on my mobile, and they do often. Feel free to do that. My personal mobile, 404-630-8452. My personal email is edsetzler, EDSETZLER @gmail.com. And our campaign website is edsetzler.com. Feel free to reach out to us anyway. Again, I'm honored to serve you, and I'd love to talk to you if you'd like the opportunity to talk in some more detail.
Thank you. Caroline, if you would mind.
So my website is carolineholco.com. My primary email address is vote@carolineholco.com. And my cell phone number is 678-329-7723. And that also doubles as the main campaign line and will continue to just be my phone number for as long as Metro PCS is a thing, which if you're not already using Metro PCS, like for real, unlimited everything, no throttling. I'm not paid. I've just been with them for 15 years. But carolineholco.com, I have contact links. I am Caroline for 46 across social media. And I welcome calls, texts, emails. You're more likely to get me if you call me or send me a Facebook message, because I seem to live with my phone attached to my hand these days, like so many of us do. But yeah, carolineholco.com, that's your central connection hub.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Kyle, if you could share yours.
Yeah, certainly. So our website is kylerenato.com, just my first and last name .com. I recognize that my last name is difficult to spell, so if you just Google Kyle for Kennesaw, you'll find us. Just Kyle for Kennesaw, Democrat for State House. We have our email, phone number, all that information is on the website. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that social media, and more than invite people to reach out. I love talking to people about kind of issues that are important to them, hearing from them. So I would love to talk with you more whenever you get the chance.
Fantastic. Two other quick points I'd like to share with everybody. So this was the 6th installment of a 10 installment session. We're turning the page a little bit in who we're talking to the next go round. We will not be doing this next Monday, which is a holiday, but the following Monday, which is the 14th, we will have the county commissioner chairs, both Mike Boyce and Lisa Cupid candidate participating. What I'd like to do, I'm looking at the chat on Facebook Live. If you would like to get a link to send in some questions, how the questions were derived tonight and for all of our other sessions, we again are 17 organizations. So the 17 organizations have did a survey, and we collected a bunch of questions, and then we had a small team sort of sort through those. If you're interested in getting a link that we'll send out to those that respond in the Facebook Live on questions you'd like to recommend for Lisa and Mike, we'll be more than glad to put that in with the questions that we'll be sorting through our teams as well. That session, again, as I mentioned, will be on September 14th at 7 p.m. And as always, we thank you for participating tonight. The last thing that I'll suggest to our candidates, which I'll ask you to hold on for a moment, is that there are a lot of interesting questions, comments, and thoughts that came up in the comment section. When this is over, this will live on our Facebook Live or Facebook site. You can go back and answer questions or directly reach out to the folks that asked those questions or had a few unique comments. But we heavily encourage that as we do every session. But listen, we want to thank everyone and be respectful of everyone's time tonight. We encourage you to come back for our next candidate forum, which again will be on the 14th. And to all of our candidates, to our moderator, we can't say thank you enough. Thank you, everybody. And I'm going to say good night as we close out this session. Thank you again for joining us. Let the candidates that are waving. And I'm gonna give it a second to show up on Facebook Live because it looks like a slight delay. But trust me, the candidates are waving and saying good night. Okay, there's your last opportunity. Hold on a second. Let me change the view so that everyone can be seen. Last chance to wave, everybody. There you go. All right, good night. And I'm asking the candidates to hold on a second.